Hi, I'm Wendy Victor Hess, author of Sweetness Without Sugar, and today we are going to make the almond chocolate chip cookie recipe on pages 196 and 197. So the first ingredient I use is 2 cups of almond flour or ground almonds. So if you have a dry blade Vitamix or you have a way to grind up your own raw almonds, you can make it into 2 cups of almond flour. You can also use a coffee grinder and grind up almonds as well if you have something like that. And you also can purchase store-bought, oftentimes in the bulk section they now have almond flour as well, and you also can purchase it in a bag or commercially produced almond flour as well. It's sometimes called almond meal, but almond flour, almond meal, ground almonds, it will work. So that's the 2 cups right there, and then to that we're going to add a half a cup of brown rice flour and pour that in. And again, you can purchase that oftentimes bulk, or a variety of different manufacturers now make it in bags as well. And then to that we're going to add a teaspoon of aluminum-free baking powder. We're doing the dry ingredients first, and our oven is already preheated to 350. And I recommend using, for baking powders, using the aluminum-free. Aluminum has been linked to changes in our brain, and Alzheimer's, it's been linked to different things. So if you want to be on the cautious side, even if it's not scientific proof enough for you, it's just something that I look for, and you can make your own choice with that. But this is a particular brand that uses aluminum free, and there's other ones out there now too that also mention that on their label. There's baking soda, ½ teaspoon. I'm going to go ahead and add that to the dry ingredients. And then the last dry ingredient is some sea salt or Himalayan salt. And you can also purchase that bulk. You can also purchase it, I usually store mine in just a jar, and I fill it up through the bulk section and mix it thoroughly. And you can see that it'll take on, since the almond meal and almond flour is the most ingredient in there, you'll see it still shows mostly that color. So moving on to the wet ingredients, we're going to start with a tablespoon of ground flax, and you can grind it in a coffee grinder, so buy the actual flax seeds in bulk or in a package, either one, or if you know somebody that grows them. And then you grind it up. I often use a coffee grinder, and you want to grind them fresh. You only want to grind a little bit at a time, so you can grind a little bit, you know, up to a ½ cup or so to keep stored in the refrigerator, but flax tends to go rancid very quickly and very easily. So it is really heat sensitive. You only want to grind what you need. You also can purchase, they now are selling different sprouted ground flax, so it's already ground for you. You want to keep something like this in the refrigerator or even the freezer so that it stays fresh. If you ever open up a bag of flax and it smells funny or it has an odor to it, it may be rancid, so you want to either return that or exchange it, or certainly not use it, because you don't want to have the rancid oils. 1/8 cup of warm. You can see it's still steaming. This is a little bit more hot than warm, but you're going to just set this aside. You can mix it a little bit, and then you really just want to coat it all with the water and then set it aside a little bit, and it'll firm up and it'll get a little bit thicker, which is what we're wanting. So there's no eggs or any other binder, so this is an ingredient that's helping keeping everything together and keeping the cookie together and keeping it moist. So we're going to let that sit for a little bit while we do the other wet ingredients. So we're going to start with some melted coconut oil, and you want to measure it when melted, which it does say in the recipe as well. So it's a ½ cup, and oftentimes if you're measuring a ½ cup and then you melt it, it's going to be way over a ½ cup, and then it would make the cookie too moist. So you really want to measure it once it's already been melted. So better to start small and then add more. Even if you add it into what's already hot, it'll melt. So even if you don't melt enough, you can add the coconut oil into the warm melted oil, and you don't need to reheat it because the liquid will already be warm enough that it'll melt. This is brown rice syrup, and it's a ½ cup. Now, a little trick that I do, which this didn't have quite enough in it, but if you put the brown rice syrup in the same container that you had the coconut oil, it doesn't stick as much, and that's true with maple syrup or anything else. So it's just kind of helpful to do your oil first, and I usually write most of the recipes that way because I find that it saves time and it's easier and it's less frustrating. So if your sticky stuff sticks, it makes it a little bit more frustrating. So this way it can just be more fun that it doesn't stick. So that's our rice syrup right there. So after the rice syrup, we're gonna go ahead and add our extracts or our flavorings. So we've got vanilla, and we're gonna go ahead and add a teaspoon of that. It smells so good. And I usually look for fair trade. You also can, if you don't want alcohol or you have a history with alcohol, you can look for the vanilla flavoring instead of the extract. The extracts contain the alcohol, the flavorings do not. So if that's something that you pay attention to, really easy to still use vanilla and just not use the extracts. Same with the flavoring. I'm going to go ahead and use the orange extract, but you can find flavorings of different ones too. They make almond and different things. So I recommend for this recipe either an orange or a lemon. So we're going to go ahead and do a teaspoon of this as well. And I chose orange for today. A berry might be nice too, but the orange and the lemon are really yummy. And then we're going to just mix this together. And you can see most of it, it's either an oil or the liquid right here of the sweetener that you see mostly. And we're going to go ahead and do that. And then the last thing that we're going to do before we combine it with our dry is we're going to come back to our flax mixture. And you can see it got a little bit thicker. It's maybe a little bit watery, more watery than we need. It's usually a little bit thicker. So that's good though, because you'll see how the cookies still come out even though it's a little bit more water than we probably need. But we're going to go ahead and add that in to the wet ingredients and mix it together again. And then we're going to just go ahead and mix these wet ingredients into our dry, pour them in, and it goes real easily with all the oil. So we're going to mix it all together here. And it takes a little bit. You want to be sure to get all of the dry ingredients included in the wet mixture. You can see it's kind of starting to form a ball. This will be a somewhat wet mixture, kind of sticky, even when it's all mixed together. And I've had friends say that they got as far as making the dough and their children were devouring the dough, and they didn't even make cookies sometimes because it just tastes so good and it's really yummy. And it smells really good too. I smell the orange right now as I'm mixing. So you can see it's all mixed together. It's still pretty sticky dough. And I write that too, that it's going to be moist and sticky so that you know. And then we're going to go ahead and fold in the chocolate chips. And I use the Enjoy Life. These are dairy, nut, and soy-free chips. These do contain a little bit of cane sugar. So you also, if you're wanting to minimize that, which I know we're talking about sweetness without sugar, you can also make the carob bark recipe in my book and use cacao instead of carob. And so you're using actual chocolate, and you can make little chips that way, and that's totally sweetened with stevia, and it tastes really delicious, and it can break into little pieces. They obviously won't be, a chip formation. They'll be handmade formation, which will be really nice. And sometimes I find that even a cup, I wrote a cup or less, and this again goes along with your journey with sweetness. If you're first coming off of refined sugar, you may want to have more chips. If you are wanting a little bit less sweet, that, as you can see, I measured out a cup and I've used a good amount, but not all of it. And you can see it really covers a lot of ground. So you're definitely going to have chips in every cookie. And you may find that you don't want the full cup. And so that's a personal choice to see what works for you. But you can see even with me moving it around, there's definitely chips, lots of chips in here. So you get that treat in every bite. So I usually grease with coconut oil, and it just allows for a higher heat temperature and imparts a little bit of the flavor as well. And we already used the coconut oil in the recipe, so it tastes really, really good. And I don't often measure. I'm measuring for the sake of this video right now, but this is about the size of the cookies that you want to make. That's about a tablespoon size. You can measure if you want to. It just depends. If you have kids that are helping you, which mine often do, it usually becomes just sort of globbed on there in the way that's fun for them with their hands. And these cookies will spread, so they will spread out, and so you want to leave space for them. I found if they do touch each other, it's really easy to separate them once they've been baked. But just filling it usually takes a couple of cookie sheets. I'm using a stainless steel cookie sheet right now, which I really like. So again, it's less aluminum because a lot of the pans and cookware out there does have aluminum. So I recommend, if it's in your budget, to get a stainless steel pan if possible, or one. Some of mine I have a little bit of both in my kitchen. Slowly transitioning. So whatever works for you. So here are the almond chocolate chip cookies when you take them out of the oven. As you can see, they're browned a little bit around the outside, and inside they're still fairly pale, but you can see more brown. And they are breakable and soft on the inside, and you can see they're bendable and really moist. Whole lot of yum. Enjoy!